currency.
The New World Order.
Those are the roots of trouble.
I imagine that right now you're feeling a bit like Alice, tumbling down the rabbit hole. Let me tell you why you're here. You're here because you know something. What you know you can't explain, but you feel it. You felt it your entire life. That there's something wrong with the world. You don't know what it is, but it's there, like a splinter in your mind, driving you mad. It is this feeling that has brought you to me. This is your last chance. After this, there is no turning back. You take the blue pill, the story ends. You wake up in your bed and believe whatever you want to. You take the red pill, you stay in Wonderland, and I show you how deep the rabbit hole goes. All I'm offering is the truth, nothing more.
For we are opposed around the world by a monolithic and ruthless conspiracy that relies primarily on covert means for expanding its sphere of influence, on infiltration instead of invasion, on subversion instead of elections, on intimidation instead of free choice, on guerrillas by night instead of armies by day. It is a system which has conscripted vast human and material resources into the building of a tightly knit, highly efficient machine that combines military, diplomatic, intelligence, economic, scientific, and political operations. Its preparations are concealed, not published. Its mistakes are buried, not headlined. Its dissenters are silenced, not praised. No expenditure is questioned, no rumor is printed, no secret is revealed. But I am asking your help in the tremendous task of informing and alerting the American people.
And now, welcome to another episode of Down the Rabbit Hole. Here's your host from federaljack.com. It's Popeye.
Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to another live edition. It is 10/10, October 10th, 2013. Sitting here by myself tonight. No guests. I need one of these nights a week, especially when I have a jam-packed week. I have another guest coming on tomorrow night. Make sure you tune in. Mr. Phil Racino from Veterans for Peace. He's been on the broadcast before. He's going to be coming on for 2 hours. We're going to be talking about everything. Veterans issues, Obama, where did the anti-war left go, his thoughts on the anti-war left, and tons of other stuff. Phil's a good guy. I've been a guest on the broadcast before in the past. You can go look it up in the archives over on Federal Jack. But he will be joining me for 2 hours tomorrow night. And tonight, I'm glad that I have the 2 hours of airwaves to myself. Because at least once a week, I like to go off and rant on a few things and play some audio for you. And there's just, when you have guests on, you have to kind of, not so much, my show is a bit relaxed, but I like to be able to rant and go off on things on my own and give my own opinion. And if I have a guest on, I don't like to interrupt them. I'll rant, but I don't want to interrupt them too much, and I'll have back and forth with them. But a lot of times I like to get their opinion on things. So I don't try to hog the areas as much. So tonight it's going to be me and my big mouth for the next 2 hours. And once in a while in the background you'll hear a snoring dog snoring away. If you haven't heard her already, she is exceptionally loud tonight for some strange reason. Anyway, I want to get into a few things. I want to cover a few topics. In the promo for the broadcast tonight, I titled it CPS Whistleblower, What is the Debt Ceiling, People Living in Fear, and More. Well, I'll get to the CPS Whistleblower thing in a little bit. Probably second hour I'll do it. Either I'll probably do it the final segment of the show, which is the last half hour of the broadcast, because it's an interview that the CPS whistleblower did with a podcaster. It's on YouTube. It was sent to me, and with some information about it. And I'm trying to get in touch with the guy himself so I can interview him. But until then, I think you need to hear the information that he came out with. He was a former CPS investigator, or special investigator, whatever his freaking title was, in Texas for a little over a year. And he quit because of what he witnessed and the things that he's going to expose. It's about 22 minutes, so I'm going to have to give him the audio clip of pretty much the whole final segment of the broadcast there, but that's fine. The information is very important. You guys need to hear it. And I am working on getting this individual on myself, but from what I can tell from my research into who he is so far, he was a former CPS investigator, and we already know some of the stuff. If you've ever investigated CPS, you won't be surprised at it. But if you don't know anything about CPS, strap yourself in. It verifies what we've been saying over the years, and it's really important for you guys to hear what he has to say. So I'll be playing that later on tonight for you guys. But there's a bunch of things I want to get into: how this country is living in fear, what the debt ceiling is. Let's start with the debt ceiling, and then we'll get into the living in fear thing, because you can see it's evident in cops and people calling the police for everything, and ratting on their neighbors. Utterly ridiculous. Everybody's so afraid of everything. We're so afraid of each other and afraid of our own shadows now that we call the cops for every little reason. If someone goes to McDonald's and they don't get their way, they call the cops because, oh my God, I didn't get my burger at Burger King or McDonald's or KFC, whatever other crappy fast food establishment that people go through. I mean, they flip out. Even cops are flipping out at fast food establishments, pulling their guns on people. Go look that one up. Anyway, the debt ceiling. We hear all this argument over government shutdown, Obamacare, the debt ceiling. What is the debt ceiling? And I feel I have to cover this because I was listening to the neocon-driven talk radio on the local AM here while I was driving around today, running errands. And, of course, you hear the talking points. The Shinseki comes out. We're not going to be able to pay veterans. Yeah, that's nice. And everybody says, see, these damn Republicans, it's their fault. The veterans aren't going to get paid. No. You people are stupid. I guarantee you Obama's personal limousine service and all the other crap that you see, the Marines taking him all over the place, that's going to continue. His dog getting Osprey rides is going to continue. $1 billion last year for him and his family. $1 billion for their vacations, their spending, everything. They cost the taxpayers, not for the past couple years, 1 year. 1 year, 4 people, over $1 billion. There's a problem. There's a big problem. You think that spending is stopping? Right. You think Pelosi and any of them are not getting paid? There's reports of all these congressmen and women running around, senators and congressmen and women running around, drinking and getting soused up all at bars throughout this whole quote-unquote shutdown. There's a huge disconnect, okay? And what is it, only like 17% of the government's actually shut down? The other, it's like 83% is still up and running. Even at the height of the shutdown, 83% of the government is up and running. Yeah, nice government shutdown, nice faux government shutdown. But the government shutdown, the rhetoric, I heard all of it today. So anyway, I hear this guy call in on the, if anybody remembers Rick Sanchez, used to be on CNN, got fired because he said that the Jews run the media, pretty much. I mean, he didn't come out and say it like that. And he was, actually what he said was honest, and what he said was accurate. But they took it as, the Jews run the media, and they threw him out. And of course, you can't say anything that has any semblance of truth on mainstream anymore. It was during this feud with, what's his name from The Daily Show, Jon Stewart. So he was on CNN. He used to be a local reporter down here. And Rick isn't the brightest of individuals. When you'd see him on CNN, he would make an ass out of himself at least once a week. I used to love to pick on him and play audio. I actually have to admit, having him leave the airwaves made my job a little bit harder because it was one less moron on the air, but they always replaced him with somebody else to make fun of because they're obvious talking heads. Anyway, so Rick is on his radio show now down here. And he tries to be, he was on CNN, and I guess he tried to be center of the road when he was there, but he kind of had more of a liberal slant than anything else. Anyway, he was on there today, and he has what he calls the conservative line and the liberal or Democrat line. And he has like the Republican/conservative line, where people will call in on those two numbers if they label themselves. So right off the bat, you're automatically, when you call into his show, you're labeling yourself. But this kid called in, and I'm sure he was probably early 20s. And he proceeded to tell Rick, who Rick kind of agreed with him for the most part, that these people in Washington have no idea what they're talking about, and blah, 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 blah. And yes, they are all scum, and most of them, if not all of them, should be fired. But he said that there shouldn't be, this kid on the radio, this caller, said that there shouldn't be any discussion about when it comes to the debt ceiling, that the president should just have the power to do what he has to do because the country's bills have to get paid. Because, hey, we have to pay our own bills, don't we? Now, when presented to the general public like that, the idea that, hey, we have to pay our bills, so the government should have to pay theirs, right? Okay, so you understand, the money that they're talking about paying back is money that was borrowed from China and money to the Federal Reserve, these foreign banks. Again, and it's paying interest. Interest payments is what we're paying. We're not paying off the debt. We're paying interest on the debt. Interest, so you understand, in case people don't understand economics, I'll simplify it for you. Interest is money for doing nothing. Interest, technically, I mean, if you want to be fair about it and abolish usury and everything, interest would be illegal. It's money for literally doing absolutely nothing. And I can understand if somebody, I loaned you 15 grand. The least you could do is pay me back 15.5. Well, maybe if you worked out something with the person, that's one thing. But I don't think it should be a mandatory thing. And that's what anyway, I could get into economics. The point is, interest is BS. So this kid has obviously no idea, first of all, anything about what the debt ceiling is. Second of all, he's looking at it from this young, naive, narrow-minded viewpoint. And look, I hate to tell you something. If you're in your 20s and you're listening to this radio show and you get pissed off at me for saying that when you're in your 20s, you're narrow-minded and you're still young and you're naive, you are. I'm in my late 30s and I'm still learning things. And I can tell you that I think completely differently than when I was in my 20s. And when I was in my 20s, I was in the military. I was a firefighter already for 6 years. I had a lot of experiences. But trust me, you're still young. Your frame of reference is still very limited compared to what it is as you get older. And the people that are older than me tell me the same thing about me, and I'm in my late 30s. So don't get offended when I say that. When you hit 30, you'll see what I'm talking about, because your whole view on life and everything starts to change. It really does. Anyway, this kid didn't know what he was talking about. And he was, the president should have the power to do what he wants. There should be no negotiation when it comes to the debt ceiling. They should just raise it. This is what he said. Well, obviously, genius, you obviously don't have an idea of what the debt ceiling really is. You see, the debt ceiling is like, well, it's not is like, the debt ceiling is our credit limit. The country's credit limit. So let's put it down to your personal level so maybe everybody can understand this. Because economics really isn't that hard if you look at it and you try to understand it. They just make it hard so that you don't want to look at it so they can get away with all the things they get away with. I mean, that's actually how it works and why they do it the way they do it. But it's actually not as hard as they would have you believe. Okay? Yeah, math can be a pain in the butt, but understanding how economics works at a base level is not that hard. At all. It really isn't. They just want you to hate it. So, the debt ceiling is our credit limit. And right now, but every year, every 8-10 months, we have an argument in Congress about the debt ceiling, at least once a year. And every year they have to raise it. Debt ceiling has to constantly be raised. At least the past couple of years, it's like every year. And it's been raised, I forgot how many times since the 70s. But the debt ceiling is constantly being raised. Why is it being raised? Well, because we spend a lot. But we're not paying enough back. So, we have a debt limit of, let's say, on your credit card, your personal credit card, And you, as the individual, also represent the country. Remember, you're the micro of the macro, the much larger part. So you bring in $10,000 a year, and you spend on your credit cards alone, not plus your other spending, just on your credit card bills alone, your credit limit. Not to mention, and whatever you do with the credit cards, I mean, but whatever other, if you don't use the credit card, say you pay for cash or something, that's not included. This is just whatever you use your credit cards for. It could be food, gas, whatever. So, you have a $10,000, you make $10,000 a year. I know it's a low number, but I'm making it simple. Or better yet, we don't have to do it yearly. Let's do it monthly. We'll break it down to monthly. Say you make... we'll say you make $10,000 a month at your job. I know it's a lot, but you make $10,000 a month. But your monthly expenditure is $12,000 a month. So you're paying out more than you're bringing in. Well, that's a problem. Because now you have to borrow that extra, right? Well, say that your credit limit is... Let's see, you're spending $2,000 extra a month. Let's say your credit limit is $10,000. And at the end of, towards the end of the year, they say, hey, look, you got to, you owe us $10,000. You've paid off each month. You pay off a certain amount, but you still over and above each month owe us about $2,000, and it's adding up, and it's close to your credit limit. Do you think if you go to the credit card company, do you think the credit card company is going to be like, well, yeah, you already owe us $10,000. We'll just raise it to $20,000. Why not? Because yeah, you'll pay it back. If you already have issues paying back the first $10,000, do you think they're going to raise it another $10,000? But yet, that's what our politicians do. Our politicians sit and fight over the quote-unquote debt ceiling. They give it a nifty little name so people don't understand it. See, if they just called it what it is and said it's the nation's credit limit, okay, people would understand it better. If your wife is running around dropping $15,000 a month on your credit cards and you only bring $10,000 a month in total, don't you think you're going to have to cut her credit cards up? Well, guess what? The federal government is the overspending wife in this situation. It's that simple. But no one ever wants to talk about spending. All this rhetoric you hear back and forth, this is all political theater. All this is BS. Government shutdown, all this, we need to fund this, we need to vote on that, blah, blah, blah. How come I haven't heard one thing about cutting spending? One thing. Not one thing. Not one senator or congressman has the balls to say, Mr. President, you talk about we must do this and we must do that and we need the money for this and we need the money for that and we don't need to play political games. Yet you're shutting down parks that don't need to be shut down for no reason at all, that the government shouldn't even have any business doing, okay, but they do. No one brings up, Mr. President, what about your $1 billion last year to show for your ass and your family's happy asses all over this country? And pay for your friggin' vacations and your wife's shopping sprees. What about that? What about cutting that spending? What about stopping invading other countries? Can't do that, can we? 4 weeks ago, 3-4 weeks ago, we had enough money to lob 1,000 cruise missiles at Syria. Where'd that money go? Suddenly we don't have enough money to keep Yellowstone National Park open. Suddenly we don't have enough money. We have to block World War II veterans. Block World War II veterans. Those guys are awesome. They don't care. They move the barricades. But block World War II veterans from the World War II memorial. What kind of scumbag does that? And the Park Service guys that go along and they do this because they're supposed, we have to, it's our job. We were told we, make things hard for the people, that's our job. No, actually, your job technically is to enforce the laws. And since there's no law at all that says the parks have to be closed during a government shutdown, there's no law. That was a decree by the president. You're a law enforcement officer. You're not a presidential enforcement stooge, I mean, maybe you are, but that's not what your job title says. Your job title says law. Let me repeat that word for you again in case you don't understand. Law enforcement. And there is no law. There is no law that gives you the right to shut those parks down and block those veterans. Disgusting. Throwing people out of their businesses and stuff. Being intimidators. Disgusting. Absolutely disgusting. You people should be ashamed of yourselves. Park rangers. Barney Fife. You guys realize that, right? You're Barney Fife. You're a friggin' park ranger. You want to get down to it, Mr. Tough Guy? You're a park ranger. You toughies. Men and women of the park ranger service, you guys are getting tough with people. Look at yourselves in the mirror when you go home tonight. We threw people out of a park. I did my job. Yeah, loser. Hope you're satisfied with yourself. And yeah, I will throw an ad hominem attack at you. If you're willing to animate that costume like that and run around in that base mentality, then you deserve the ad hominems. Anyway, yes, I'm in rare form. I want to play a clip for you really quick. I'm sure some of you might have seen this, but it's been making the rounds on Facebook. It's a little comedic clip, and I don't know where it originated from, but it's got some famous two famous actors, I guess you could say, in it / comedians, and it's a little bit. It's about a 3-minute skit. It's humorous, but you'll understand the basic concept. It kind of explains the debt ceiling, as I did. As I said, it's the nation's credit limit. So just take a listen. Maybe you have anybody in the room around you right now that doesn't understand the debt limit. Maybe this piece of humor will help them understand it. Because, humor does have a way of enlightening people. All different forms of art can be used to wake people up. Here we go.
What can I do for you today?
I would like to raise my debt limit.
Excuse me?
My debt limit, I'd like to raise it.
Because the last time I checked, Mr. Smith, you were in serious debt.
Yeah, it's pretty bad. Figure we should raise that limit.
Yeah, it says here you're $140,270 in debt.
Right. So I figured we should raise that limit to about $170,000. I just bought a 60-inch flat screen. Have you ever been to Australia?
No.
Leaving tomorrow, mate. You should check it out. Great parasailing.
Do you have some new income that I don't know about?
No. Still making about 21 grand a year.
Okay. And are you still spending $38,000 a year?
If that's what it says.
So you're adding $17,000 a year in debt.
Oh, is that what it comes out to? Debt limit going up. Ding!
Have you made any cuts in your expenses?
Oh, of course, yes. My wife and I cut $380 out of our annual budget. It's $380.
Brutal. Huh. Okay, so you're adding $17,000 a year to your $140,000 in debt, and you cut $380.
Well, you say it like that, it makes it not sound like a lot.
Hey, maybe you should think about generating some new income. Maybe a new job, maybe ask for that raise.
Oh, asking for that raise, I'm not comfortable. That's an awkward conversation. I've always been able to raise my debt limit.
Yeah, well, this is a little different.
Well, how?
We're in the middle of a recession, and your credit rating will plummet if you continue to go along this path.
I almost had it.
You don't see how bad this is, do you?
I cut my budget by $380. Are you kidding?
I'm sorry, Mr. Smith. We can't help you.
You're just a little like...
I'm very sorry.
My wife is going to lose it.
Been there.
I mean, $380 was bad enough. I mean, this is going to end our marriage. We stopped talking to each other for a month. The baby was totally freaked out.
Wait. You have kids?
Yeah. Yeah.
Sign there.
All right. Aren't kids a blessing?
And it's his kid
She's
signing
got plenty
the...
of time to deal with all this, right?
Absolutely.
It's his kid signing the paperwork, and you hear him say, "She's got plenty of time to deal with this, right?" So you get the idea. What the message they're trying to put across to you is that all of this money that we're borrowing now is on the backs of our children and our grandchildren and their children. And it's true. This is insane. Why do we need to keep spending money? What are we spending money on? How come that's never an option? They always want to talk about cutting spending for Social Security, which, by the way, is not an entitlement. People pay into that. The money that you earn each week, your paycheck, Social Security comes out of Genius, so that ain't an entitlement. You paid into it. It's like a savings account. The reason why the money's not there is because back in the 60s under Johnson and since, they raided the fund. And now Social Security goes to the general fund. When you look in the Social Security fund, it just says IOU. So when they piss away money on military-industrial complex, wars of aggression, and everything else, that's your Social Security money too. But they don't tell you that. Nope. We're going to have to cut spending to Social Security. Why? If you had left it alone and not touched it, there wouldn't have been a problem. But no. They had to go in and start pulling money out of it. But they don't tell you that, do they? That's why there's a problem with money for Social Security. It's got nothing to do with entitlements. That's different. But no, they won't tell you that, will they? How about the money? How about, they bitch about giving people money here in the United States, where these freaking freeloading scumbags here in this country, they want benefits and the people on food stamps. How about, and I'm not saying that there's not fraud, but how about the millions of dollars we give to foreign countries and foreign aid? How about cutting that? I don't know. Maybe we use that here? Perhaps? Just an idea. We're going to break. We'll be right back. Ladies and gentlemen, we are back. So, I hope you have a vague, somewhat better understanding, at least vague, maybe a little bit better than vague, understanding of what the debt ceiling is. It's your credit limit. It's that simple. They try to put fancy labels on it and terms and all this other political speak, news speak, whatever the hell you want to call it. It's your credit limit. We've reached the credit limit and we spend way more money than we take in. So the only options are to keep spending, raise taxes, levy more fines on people through new laws, which is what they do. Never ever is the answer to cut spending, right? No, you can't do that because cutting spending would make frigging sense. That would absolutely make sense. Don't even get me started. Anyway, there's other things I need to get into. So, one of the other things I wanted to talk about was people living in fear nowadays. We live in a constant state of fear. Everybody fears their own shadow, their next door neighbor. I mean, people want to get insurance for everything under the sun now. I mean, I've seen people insure everything. Everything that you could possibly think of, there's insurance out there for now. Because, oh my God, we might need it. Something bad could happen. We have to protect ourselves against every bad little thing that happens. Newsflash, ladies and gentlemen, you cannot be prepared for every little, you could be prepared, but you can't be prepared to stop every bad thing from happening. You can be prepared to deal with it, but you can't be prepared to stop it from happening because it's not going to. Okay? Laws and cops. First of all, cops don't stop bad things from happening. I think we've already established this during the years of this broadcast now where, cops, even when they're there on scene, like the case of the guy getting stabbed by the serial killer in New York, in the subway system, they sat there and, they actually stood on the other side of a doorway and looked through the window at this dude as he was getting sliced up, and he was fighting this guy who was stabbing the crap out of him, back, head, chest, arms, just stabbing this dude, and the cops that had guns, I may add, guns, things that go bang, bang, you can shoot bullets from a distance. They were literally standing on the other side of a door watching this guy get stabbed, and they didn't do anything until after the civilian who was getting stabbed subdued the guy with the knife. Then they came out. So, what was that about? Well, they didn't want to get hurt. They feared for their lives. Well, you're cops. It's your job. This country is so bass-ackwards right now, it's not even funny. People call the cops because there's little kids at the beach, nude toddlers at the beach, because they maybe strip the kid down out of the bathing suit at the shower really quick and rinse the sand and everything off. And people will go, well, that's indecent exposure. What about child pornography? There could be someone with a camera around and catch that kid nude and then go home and do illicit things with the pictures. Well, first of all, yes, there is child pornography. But the fact that you're going to go there right off the bat because a parent takes the kid's bathing suit off at the showers to wash them down, newsflash, parents have been doing that since public showers have been around, morons. It's a common occurrence to see a kid that's maybe a year old or a year and a half old with the parent at the shower, and the parent maybe strips the bathing suit down a little bit so they can wash the sand out of the bathing suit for the kid so they don't get a rash. You can't handle it? You that much of a prude? Oh my God, there's a nude child, oh my God. Don't stare, first of all, don't stare at the nude kid. How about that? How about stop being an idiot? But no, people have called the cops on others for this. Go look this up. Google or whatever search engine you want. I hate giving them advertising just by saying their name, but go on whatever search engine you want, start page, whatever. Look up police called for naked toddler on beach. And I'm sure you'll see I know you'll see at least one, if not more than one story about people literally having the cops called on them. And then the cops give the parents a ticket or threaten them with arrest. I could arrest you. I mean, if you're a cop, really? You're not using any common sense now? You just go out and you act like an a-hole? I mean, I know there are still some good cops out there. Come on, guys. Hello? Ridiculous. But that's the culture we live in right now. Everybody's afraid because that's why they dial 911. Everybody laughs when, these idiots, they went to the freaking burger joint and didn't get their burger their way and they dialed 911. What a jerk off. Ha ha ha. You know why? They've been programmed. They've been programmed that when things don't go their way, you call the police. That's why they do that. What you're seeing is their programming in action. And I'm not saying it's mind control, like someone's beaming it just into that individual. I'm saying on a mass level, people have been programmed that anything bad happens, you call the cops. You get in a fight with somebody. I mean, at school now, a student is unruly at school, they call the cops. When I was a kid, they didn't call the cops. That was a last resort, dude. The cops didn't get called unless they really needed to. I went to school with metal detectors. I spent my senior year going to a school with metal detectors on the doors. Kids that got thrown out of cities in like Newark and Irvington and Elizabeth. Anybody from up north or knows Jersey knows those cities. Cities like Patterson. I went to school with guys that got thrown out of high schools in those cities for being too violent or for fighting, and this was their last chance school. Believe it or not, they actually had a good educational system set up at the school, and they actually had a good program, and kids were learning. But back then, they didn't call the cops the way they do now. I was talking about this the other night with somebody. I said, when we were kids, we lit off bottle rockets and M80s in school. We used to flush cherry bombs down the toilet. Watch them blow the pipes up and laugh about it. Be little idiots. They barely called the cops for things like that. Now, you'd have the friggin' SWAT team at your house. The things I did when I was a kid, I would have gotten arrested for if I was a kid nowadays. I would have been in jail and I would have a record before I was 18 years old. I ended up in the back of a cop car a few times before I was 18. I can tell you I didn't get caught 98% of the times, but I had been thrown in the back of a cop car once or twice. The difference was those cops, they were older school cops. They knew my parents. Even if they didn't know my parents, they would have found out where I lived and taken me home. They wouldn't have arrested me and taken me to jail. You know why? Because it was about setting the kid right, doing the right thing, and serving the general public. Because the cops that were in my town when I grew up, 98% of them lived in my town. A few of them didn't, but most of them lived in the town. or right next door. So they had to deal with the townsfolk. That's another issue. A lot of cops nowadays in these cities and these towns don't live in the same area that they police. Well, and that's pretty bad, because if you don't live in that area, then you'll be more prone to do bad things, because it's just a job, right? It's just like going to work at Kmart. You can be a dick to the customers over there when you get off your shift. You don't have to worry about it. That's the way they look at it. If they actually lived in the same vicinity, it would be a much different story, because then they'd have to deal with the very same people that they sit there and they cause trouble. You know, if I lived in the same area of a city where I drove around beating people up and hitting people, and I lived in that city, pretty soon I would get a bad name, especially if it got on the news or anything else. I would get a bad name, and people would start to know who I was, even if they didn't know me. And I would, if they didn't know me personally or had any dealings with me, they would know who I was. They would be aware of me. And very quickly, if I was this bad cop, I would become persona non grata, right? That's the way it should be. But the problem is, a lot of these cops, they don't live in the same town. And then in big cities, it's hard because you got bazillions of people. So anyway, I want to get back onto the subject of what brought me to where we are, which is the fear that we all live in. The cops are fed the very same fear. But as an example of this, I want to play a snippet of audio. I'm going to interrupt it here and there, but it's from CNN, and I'm not going to play the whole thing, but I want to get the information out about the schools. And you'll hear a commentator say something, that this isn't just this one school, that it's all schools, or not all schools, but more and more schools, I should say, are starting to look into this and say they think it's a good idea. But they banned balls, cartwheels, tag, and other such activities like that during recess, because they're afraid the kids could get hurt. And let me remind you that now on these playgrounds, they have like rubber mats. The ground around the playground is usually got it's rubber. They have a lot of times these schools have like a rubber mat in the ground, or some sort of softer, usually integrated with rubber somehow, type flooring material, we'll say. So these kids don't get hurt. When I was a kid, there was none of that. There was blacktop, which when I was a kid, it wasn't even as smooth as it is now. It was like tar mixed with rocks. And if you fell, it was like going across a cheese grater. And you learned. I mean, you got up, dusted yourself off, and you learned, hey, I could get hurt. Maybe I have to be more careful. It was a character-building experience. And the problem is now they're not building any character, because these children, you might as well just send your kids, if they're going to public school, you might as well just put your kid in one of those Marshmallow Man dog training suits. The kind you could push somebody off a house and they won't get hurt in, because it's just pretty much we walk around in one big pillow. That's basically what we should just, I guess, send kids to public school in now, right? Because it's always for the kids. It's always to protect the kids, even though the same sick bastards that are usually pushing these laws to quote-unquote protect kids are the same sick, twisted pricks that are molesting them and, buying kids from people like Jerry Sandusky. Yeah, go look it up. Anyway, and they also work with CPS, but we'll get into that. Anyway, banning balls, cartwheels, and tag during recess.
We all want to protect kids from injury, obviously. But how far is going too far? That's the question that is facing Weber Middle School on Long Island, New York. Apparently, they have banned balls. We're talking footballs, baseballs, soccer balls, lacrosse balls, and any other equipment that could harm a child. And they've even said that cartwheels and rough games of tag would require supervision from a coach. Soft Nerf balls, however, would be allowed. Kelly.
Tag and cartwheels require supervision from a coach. You know what tag and cartwheels were when I was a kid? It was expected of you as a child. My mother would let me watch TV for maybe about a half hour to an hour, and she'd say, turn that idiot, she calls it the idiot box. She didn't call it the television. She referred to it as the idiot box and told me to turn it off and go outside and play. And she would, if I did not listen to her, she would unplug the television, or the idiot box, and she would throw me literally outside and say, don't come back for 4 or 5 hours. That was my mother. Go outside and be a kid. Go outside and play. She even said to me, go outside and break a limb. Come back with something broken if need be. Just go be a child. My mother was not worried about her boys being boys. Okay, she knew boys were boys. She knew that I would... There were times I came back, literally, I came back one day with half my pinky finger sliced off. I have a huge scar on my right hand. Cut half the center section of my pinky finger right out. Scooped it out. I mean, totally eviscerated it right to the bone. Carved everything right out. Boom, big chunk of it. I went and found it, picked it up, and walked home with it from the park behind my house. My mother wasn't home. My aunt was. She promptly passed out because of she doesn't handle blood too well. But my mother was not surprised that I very calmly walked home and I said, we have a problem. And my aunt was like, what? I'm like, this needs to get sewn back onto here. And that's when she went down for the count. And then when she got up, she helped me clean it up and did what we had to do. My mother was working, and we contacted my mother, and I was like, should we go to the hospital? My mother was like, well, if you go, blah, blah, blah. I said, screw it. So I used butterfly stitches, and we put it together at my house, and it worked. My finger still works 30 some odd years later. But when I was a kid, that's the way being a kid was. I mean, you fell out of trees, you broke your arm, you did stupid things, you rode your bicycle. My friends and I, we used to ride bikes at like 11, 12 o'clock at night down roads that was barely any lighting on. One of my friends ran into a friggin' gate in the middle of the road one night because he couldn't see it. It was one of these metal arms that went across the road. You could barely see the thing until you were right up on it because there were no street lights, and he nailed that thing. He had black and blues all over him, all busted up, messed up. You know what? We still rode our bikes. We didn't, I can't ride my bike anymore. I rode a skateboard down a hill behind my father's place because my parents were separated. I rode a friggin' skateboard down the hill. I wiped out. I took out the skin on the entire one side of my body. Okay? If I remember correctly, it was the right side. From my pinky toe all the way up to my shoulder, I was skinned. I mean, I had road rash. It looked like I crashed a motorcycle, except I was a teenager and I had crashed my skateboard. It was a steep-ass hill. You know what? I walked up, went in my father's house. He washed me up, and of course he was pouring like peroxide on me. And when I was a kid, parents would sit there and scrub the hell out of things. Oh, don't be a wimp. Just sit there and take it, because their parents did the same thing to them, and they were from an older school generation, and I had to deal with it. My father said, "Sit down, shut up, let me clean you up. Don't cry, don't be a baby, and deal with it. You're gonna get bumps and scrapes throughout life. This will toughen you up and build some character for you." And you know what it did? Okay, I didn't die from it. Nowadays, kids can't deal with anything now when they're later in their teen years or whatnot because their parents are even in their early 20s and then they end up killing themselves. Why is there such a high rate of suicide amongst teenagers? Oh my God, when they get picked on. Because you're setting your kids up for failure. Because from the time they're little, they bump themselves into a table and you're, oh my God, little Jimmy. And you're running over and you're petting him and pampering him. That's why kids are committing suicide at the rate that they're committing suicide when they get picked on. That's one of the reasons. Well, we need laws against bullying. No, you need to tell your kid to kick the shit out of the bully. You do it to the one with the biggest mouth. Look, there's a lot of bullies. You pick the one with the biggest mouth that all the other ones mimic and mock or not mock, but mimic and seem to look up to, and you kick his ass. Okay? Then maybe all the other ones will go, oh, well, damn. I know. I looked up to that guy. He got his ass whooped. So that's the way it works. You know what that does for the kid? A lot of people go, "Oh, Papa, you're trying to push violence." No, I'm pushing self-defense. And you know what that does for the child in the future when he's older and entities like the powers that shouldn't be or whoever try to do him wrong or her wrong. That child will have the natural inclination to stand up for itself as a free individual. When you pamper them and you coddle them and you put them in a box, they're useless as adults. Look, I dated a young lady years and years ago, probably about 10 years ago now. Beautiful, beautiful, beautiful woman. But unfortunately, she was very coddled, we'll say. And she became a mama's girl, and she could not be too far away from her mother. And for all of the things that were great about her, that was one of the biggest turn-offs, because that made other things larger problems. She couldn't handle certain situations. A stressful situation would come up. She wouldn't be able to handle it. She would freak out. Whereas other people in her family that I know were raised differently. And because they were raised differently, they were more independent and more apt to take care of their things in a proper fashion, whether it be because of a certain time frame or whatever. And it serves as a shining example of, if you, at least to me, because I understand it, because I've witnessed it firsthand, if you coddle and pamper somebody their whole life, when they get older, they're not going to be able to take care of themselves. My mother told me the reason that she raised me the way she did, and she taught me the things she did. Like, I know how to cook. I do, as I've said this before, I do most of the cooking in my house. And my wife loves it. She does other stuff, but the cooking I like to do. It's fun for me. My mother taught me how to cook. By the time I was 10 years old, I knew how to make homemade lasagna. I knew how to make all sorts of different pasta dishes, all other things. Chicken cutlets, all meatloaf, tons of different things. You give me, I understood the basics of cooking enough that you give me a recipe and the proper stuff, and I could do it. It wasn't that hard. My mother told me the reason she wanted to raise me like that, and she said to me, look, I'm not going to be around your whole life. One day I'm going to be gone, and you're going to have to take care of yourself. And my father was the same way. Even though my parents were divorced, the one thing they both did was they both instilled the proper survival instincts and the proper things into me. I have to give them credit. They did a good job raising me, even for being divorced parents and the drama that goes along with that. They both did a good job. So, but they didn't want a child to be useless. My mother, luckily she did teach me how to cook and do my own laundry and everything else, because she passed away when I was 27 years old. I was 26. It was about 2.5, 3 months before my birthday she died. So, I was about 26 years old, almost 27, we'll say, when my mom passed away. And, you would think by 27 you should be able to, take care of yourself. But a lot of people that are that age, even if they live on their own, they don't know how to really cook. They eat out. They might pick up takeout or whatever. I knew how to cook thoroughly, clean, do my own laundry, and not only did I know how to do it, but I didn't mind doing it because I had already done it for myself for years. These are the type of things you have to, instill in your child. The point is, my mother, when I asked her why she taught me this before she died, we were talking, and I said, why did you teach me all this? And she used to say this to me all the time, but she said, I knew that I wasn't going to be around forever to take care of you and pamper you. So in growing up, she was the same way. She used to tell me, she wasn't one of these mothers that was, oh, my poor little baby, he got in a fight. No, she'd be like, go kick his ass. Don't come over here and cower to me. Go back and fight. And that never happened. I never had to go cower to her. I always used to come and get to her and be like, I got in trouble for fighting. But my older brother used to come home, he got his nose broken when he was younger and stuff. So I was like, that ain't going to be me. And that's not happening to me. And my mother said she wanted me to, she said, you don't start fights, but you finish them. Okay, she was tough with me too. Like when I needed my rear end kicked, I got it. But the point is, these parents, these kids nowadays, they're not being raised. They're being raised like, oh my God, any bad thing that could happen. And it's because of fear. Again, it's a different mindset. When I was a kid, the parents were being bombarded with that. But it was a lot different because there were more parents out there that spoke to each other, A. Nowadays, they don't, everybody's afraid of each other, again, living in fear, right? So they don't speak to each other. But the parents would fight the school system more. Now it's more of they go along pretty much with whatever the school system wants. which is kind of disgusting. But anyway, let's see. We got a few minutes. Let's play some more of this audio. Banning balls, cartwheels at recess.
Wallace is here to discuss this with us, and she's been watching some of the response online. It seems to me that you probably got a lot of feedback from both sides of the issue. Is this throwing the baby out with the bathwater, though?
Yeah, and if you guys could guess, which side do you think we heard more from, who said that this is ridiculous? We heard stupid, we heard crazy, we heard, so many parents say that our kids are so structured these days. They get so little time to just play, to just be. We have an obesity crisis in this country. This is the wrong way to go. On the flip side, there were people who said, injuries are injuries, and an injury, a head injury, could be serious. And there's also concerns about liability for the school. So we did hear from some people on the other side.
There's the answer. The insurance companies. Effing lawyers. And lawyers are a problem on both sides of this. Because the ones that work for the school are, oh my God, we can get sued for every little thing under the sun. You have to make sure that they don't do this. Otherwise, blah, 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 blah. Lawyers for the insurance company probably, scum. And then the other side of the coin is the lawyers who would work with the parents to sue the school if the kid was playing dodgeball and got beamed in the head with a friggin' dodgeball. When I was a kid, we loved dodgeball. Dodgeball was the favorite time of gym class. You got to hang out with your friends and just play a game, not do some crap, calisthenics or anything else that you didn't want to do, right? No one wanted to do that. Nobody wanted to do calisthenics or anything when you were a kid. So you got to play with your friends, but you also got to hammer people that you didn't like with a dodgeball. But it was a rubber ball inflated with air. Well, Popeye, you could break someone's nose. Well, yeah, I guess you could break someone's nose. I mean, this is ridiculous, though. Seriously. So what if someone gets hurt? It's fucking gym class. It's character building. This is the problem. Our country has become... We've been programmed to be so afraid of everything. Now it's, oh my God, there's dirt. Oh my God, the sun is out. Oh my God, a shadow. I could get hurt. My kid could get, what are you going to do? Strap your kid to his bed and never let them out of the bed because they might fall off their bicycle or they might get hurt? Newsflash, kids get hurt. Whoa! It sets them up for their adult life so that they can handle things. Again, not setting the kid up for success, setting the children up for failure, because we teach them at a very young age to be afraid of everything, including their own shadows. Not good. All right, ladies and gentlemen, we're going to break. Stay tuned. We will be right back with hour number 2. Don't go anywhere. Ladies and gentlemen, we are back with hour number 2 here on tonight's live edition of Down the Rabbit Hole. I am your host, Popeye, from federaljack.com. It is October 10th, 2013. Hour number 1, I was talking about how... I ended off talking about how this country lives on fear. And we most certainly do. And I have to give a big shout out to AR in the chat room for throwing this link in the chat room I found, because I check the chat room randomly, usually during the breaks, because I don't want to get sidetracked while I'm talking, but I noticed he'd thrown a link in to the chat, and which just goes along with what I was talking about with banning cartwheels and everything, because, oh my God, the kids could get hurt. This is from September of this year, last month. I missed this one. Thank you, AR, for throwing it in the chat. I will be putting it up on Federal Jack. Mercy rules $200 fine in California Youth Football League brings protest. What the hell is the Mercy rule? Well, apparently, California Youth Football League is throwing a flag, a parent. This is I love the news puns they try to use. A parent in the football league is throwing a flag. Oh, God. News reporters. Be a reporter, not a comedian. Anyway, there's a new fine, a $200 fine plus possible suspension of the coach. Wait, it gets worse. but $200 fine and possible suspension of a coach for California Youth Football League. Okay, not NFL or anything like that. I'm sure if it was NFL, it'd be $20,000. But a $200 fine and suspension of the coach for cheating, perhaps, betting on the game, being an abusive prick like some of these coaches are. No? None of those things? Well, what could you possibly be fined $200 and possible suspension for if you allow your team to win by 35 points or more? Yes. I said that right. You're not hearing things. There's not crap in your ears. I'll repeat that. A $200 fine and possible suspension of any coach who allows his team to win a game by 35 points or more. Because you have to be fair. It's not nice if the one team is horrible, and because they are horrible, they have maybe 25 points or whatever. Let's say the score is 21 to, I don't know, for 35 points. Let's say it's like 21 to 60 something, right? Well, or 60 something to 21. Well, obviously, the team that's got the score of 21 or 20, whatever, 20, whatever you want to give it to them, whatever point you want to, they got an extra point for kicking. Okay, whatever. The point is, if the point spread is like, I don't know, if it's like 40, 50, 60 points, obviously the one team is really good and the other team is bad, and they need to figure out what they're doing wrong to improve their players. Now, it might be crushing for those players, especially if they're kids, but, a loss. But hey, it's part of life. Sometimes you win them and sometimes you lose them. It's a lesson. It also maybe teaches the kid to be better. So if you lost this game, be better so the next game you won't lose, right? You would think. That's the way, isn't that what sports are for? But no, sports aren't for that now. Sports have to be fair all across the board. And by the way, I wasn't a jock when I was in school. I played sports when I was younger, but I wasn't a jock when I was in school. I couldn't stand them. So I'm not defending them. It's only, you Popeye must have been a jock, ex-football player. Nope. They actually wouldn't let me on the football team. They said I was too violent. Long story. Anyway, yeah. So I'm not a jock by any means. And I don't see a problem with kids playing football when they're little, or kids playing soccer or whatnot. And if they lose, they lose. It's part of the game. But see, they want to transform everything to be PC and it has to be fair. It's for the kids, Popeye. That child is going to develop a horrible case of, an eating disorder because he feels so bad because he was on a football team once and they lost the game by 40-something points. Well, too bad. Maybe tell him to be better at football then. Tell him maybe he needs to lose a few pounds. Maybe he's too fat and he couldn't run fast enough. Maybe that was part of the problem. Who knows? Analyze what they did wrong and fix it. But no, rather than do that, which is what you would do with that, because, by the way, that's what happens when you're young and you go through these experiences. It shapes you for dealing with other things in your life. Ooh, who would have thunk it? Previous experiences as a child would mold us and get us ready for tougher things down the road. Based on the same premise, though, of dealing with a bad situation and how you deal with it. Who would have thunk it? Wow. Who would have thought? I know. It's sarcasm at its best. Anyway, this for the kids crap. Everything is for the kids. We need to ban drugs. It's for the kids. We need to ban this. It's for the kids. We need to ban everything. It's for the kids. How come we don't ever ban Satan worshipping and pedophilia by the elite and the senators and congressmen and people in the White House and people in the Obama administration and Bush administration and Clinton administration and all these administrations before it and all these other positions of power in Washington? Yeah, all of them. Supreme Court. How about we ban that? How about we ban child rape by politicians? I can get behind that ban. What? I hear crickets in Washington. Gee, I wonder why that is. No takers on the child rape ban. Oh, because you're all into it. Or at least most of you, scumbags. It's for the kids. Right, it's for the kids. Mm-hmm. And then they get their minions so worked up about it that they run around shooting little dogs. A 12-pound dog got capped. 12 pounds. Cop shoots a 12-pound dog. It was advancing on me, and I was afraid for my life. The cop is like 6 foot 2, 6 foot. He's 6 foot and 300 pounds. He's a probation officer. Obviously, he's a little overweight. Maybe that's why he couldn't run fast enough. Maybe if you cut down on the donuts there and went to the gym a little bit, you'd be able to outrun a 12-pound Jack Russell Terrier. Nope. Cop shoots it because he was in fear for his life, because these cops go out on their job on that fear vibe. It's not the same vibe it was 25, 30 years ago when I was a kid and I used to see these guys rolling around. No, it's a different vibe. If you don't know about this, listen.
Good evening and thanks for watching Fox 31 News. I'm Romney Smith.
And I'm Matt Pritchard. An Albany woman wants answers after a probation officer fatally shot her dog on Monday.
She says the officer claimed he was in fear for his life, but as the dog only weighed 12 pounds, while the officer was nearly 300 pounds. Fox 31's Colby Gallagher has more on that story.
He thought the dog was going to bite him, and he was afraid for his life. He was in fear of his life of the dog biting him.
At 12 pounds, Cherry Shelton says her 2-year-old Jack Russell Terrier Patches wasn't a threat to anyone. But on October 7th, during a house visit to check on her son, a state probation officer saw the dog run out the door towards him while barking and thought she was dangerous. What happened next, Shelton says, was in the blink of an eye. Before Patches could reach the officer's feet, he pulled out his gun and shot, where the bullet then went through the dog and into the ground. Shelton says after being shot, Patches hid behind the house for 30 minutes, fighting for her life.
My dog is laying there, and I'm just there saying I don't know what to do.
Before she finally passed away. A report filed with the Albany Police Department identifies the probation officer who pulled the trigger as Antoine Jones and says he stands 6 feet tall and weighs nearly 300 pounds. A fact Shelton says just doesn't match his reaction.
Maybe he's afraid of dogs. I don't know what caused him to shoot. I mean, I thought maybe, a little dog like that, you could stump your feet or you can kick him out of the way or something, but he just shot her.
And because Shelton says the officer had been to the house before and knew Patch's habit of barking, she wants answers as to what went so wrong this time. According to the report, Jones told police he gave Patches multiple verbal commands to get back, but the dog continued to come towards him in an aggressive manner. Fox 31 has placed numerous calls to the State Department of Corrections spokeswoman who has been updated on the case, but the office has not responded. For now, Shelton says her family will focus on getting a cross for Patch's grave and moving on.
It's kind of hard.
A 300-pound cop, I was afraid for my life from a 12-pound Jack Russell Terrier. What do you think he's going to do to your teenage kid who's 14, 15, 16? And this cop, well, he's a probation officer. Still thinks he's John Wayne, and if he's out and about, he thinks he's Johnny Law. What happens if he sees a teenage kid doing something he perceives to be bad, and he approaches the kid, and he's got his gun on him, and the kid makes a move? Not like he's going to punch the cop or grab anything, but he makes a move that the cop considers to be aggressive. Not that it is aggressive, but the cop perceives it to be aggressive because, see, again, the cop is not on this level of, I know everything, I am omnipotent, I am a cop, I can sense everything, I am RoboCop, he is a friend, he is a good citizen, have a nice day, enemy, take gun out, shoot. That's not how it works. There's no, that would be like a computer, and computers, although there's no emotion, they use logic. Cops don't do that. That's not what they're trained for. They're trained that everybody's out to get them. So that cop's already on the fear vibe. So he's not running on logic already. He's running off of emotion. Now he sees a little 12-pound Jack Russell Terrier, pulls his gun out, shoots it, right? Because I'm in fear for my life. So what happens when he sees your teenage son or daughter and they do something that he perceives to be threatening his life? Because he's already in that state of mind that everybody's out to get me. Oh my God. It's like they're living in a horror movie. And they're running from the killer at all times. if he's willing to shoot a Jack Russell Terrier, a 12-pound dog, because he felt threatened, he shouldn't have his gun. And by the way, like the lady said that owns the dog, or that owned the dog, the guy had been there before, and he knew the dog. And if the dog knew him, the dog was probably running up to greet him or say hello or whatever. I mean, obviously he knows the dog. He knows the dog barks. But cops have been trained that a dog barking instantaneously means that the dog is evil and you got to execute it. And every time I talk about cops shooting dogs, in the comment section, usually in the YouTube video, there'll always be one guy that says, well, look, I have to agree, I can't see any reason why, if the dog is going to come up and run up and attack him, well, then it's the owner's fault for not keeping the dog on a leash. Genius, this is the person's private property. You're coming on to their private property. It doesn't matter who you are. You're not omnipotent. This individual is not omnipotent. This happens all the time where cops will come on to someone's personal private property and execute their animal, and then the police department or their boss or whoever, the sheriff, whoever, will always say, well, it's justified because that officer felt in danger of their life. Okay, well, does that mean that every time someone goes out and attacks a police officer and they say, well, I felt in threat of my life because all these cops, there's this huge uptick in police violence, shooting and killing and tasing and, innocent people, ladies, dogs, doesn't matter. They're, open season on everybody and anything. So what happens when one day someone goes nuts and they mow down a cop or something, right? They run him over in a car, and some guy directing traffic, whatever. Somebody just loses it one day because of it. And their defense is, well, I felt in fear for my life because the cops are all around me at all times. And, they're constantly killing people. Do you know what they'll do to that guy after they beat the crap out of the guy? Do you know what if he's still alive, do you know what they'll do to him? They'll try to put him in a way, I'm sure his lawyer would be like, oh, the best defense is insanity. And they'd probably rule him as a nutbag. Oh, he hated police and this and that and the other thing. And there's all sorts of laws to protect him. And I'm not condoning it or saying that it should happen. But if something like that happens, right, it'll be, the police and blah, 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 blah. And the guy, he could use the excuse of, I felt in fear for my life, but it doesn't matter. How many times have cops been shot in the middle of a raid on the wrong house at 3 o'clock in the morning, and one of them dies, and the homeowner, if he survives, gets put in jail for 20 or 30 years because he killed a cop? But if they kill him and none of them are injured, they get medals because they wear a costume. Because they're told to go out and do that job. That's their job as an agent of the state. And that's okay because they're amped up with fear and they're told that you're bad guys. But when the roles are reversed, it's different. You see my point? That's where I'm going with this. Okay? It's not right. Okay, if you went and anybody that look at the guy that he went out and I think it's in Seattle. He for no reason, he didn't know the cop that he killed. He's a cop killer. He just went out and cold-blooded killed this cop for no reason. I mean, well, he said it was because of he was tired of all the police brutality and everything going on. But this cop that he killed wasn't beating on anybody or anything like that. He just went up and killed the guy. Didn't get pulled over or get in a fight with the guy and then lose it. He just went out and killed this guy, and he said he did it because he was tired of all the police brutality and stuff. But you could see how this guy got treated. He got the crap kicked out of him. He got, they're throwing a book at him. You're a dirty cop killer, this and that. And he said, look, I was tired of witnessing all the police brutality. Oh, he's crazy. He's nuts. But when the roles are reversed and it's a police officer doing it to civilians, look at the cop. He tased I think it was either a taser point or gun point. You get the whole family out of the car and had them all on the ground, screaming and yelling. And I think he ended up tasing the boyfriend because I think it was a guy with his kid and his girlfriend, and I think there was 3 of them. And they got the whole family out on the ground at gunpoint. That's a cop right in the middle of the street. Or they execute people's dogs, or they shoot people. But that's okay. It's justified. Because they're a law enforcement officer. Because they wear a badge and they wear a costume and they animate a costume. Do you see how hypocritical that is? You see how hypocritical that is? And I bring that up because it's all based off of fear, their reaction. I mean, some of it's based off of ego too because of the uniform, but cops when I was a kid used to hold themselves to a higher standard. They didn't do this type of thing. I can remember, like, I would say in the past 10 years is when it's got really bad. With the SWAT teams, I mean, since 9/11, but like in the past 10, 12 years, SWAT teams, shooting dogs, and it's because even if you were told when I was a kid, if you were a cop, if you were told, oh, the public out there is out to get you, whatever, it wasn't like it is today. Now they're out to, it's us versus them. We're at a war with scum in society, and that's why these cops act like this. They get them so afraid of everything around them that they shoot a 12-pound Jack Russell Terrier or your teenage kid. It happens, okay? And a lot of it there is the mindset of the individual as well. You have to take that that's a large portion of it, but all of them are fed this fear vibe. So think about all these different personalities that do the job of law enforcement officer, right? And constable on patrol. That's what COP stands for. So they're all out there doing this job, animating these costumes. They all have different personalities. But the one thing they all have in common is when they go in that squad room each night, they get the shit scared out of them. They get things pumped into them. They also get told, oh, you got to write a certain amount of tickets, this, that, and the other thing. But always, because it's very effective, it's a great way to control people, and it's a great motivator, fear is always interjected. And because they're operating on that base level of fear, and it's always the people that manipulate that level of fear to them always find a way to get them to continue to buy into that fear. One way is when there's an incident where, say, a police officer kills somebody, and it's just blatantly not justified, but the police department and the police union will always say it's justified. We're taking the side of the officer, which they shouldn't. If they would get rid of bad cops and do the right thing and there actually has been some news of that going on lately. But if they do the right thing, then the citizens would appreciate them more. But they don't. They usually, as soon as a cop does something wrong, everything's, it's justified, blah, 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 blah. And unfortunately, it doesn't matter what the situation is. It doesn't matter what they do. I mean, they'd have to, even if they get caught on video, they get away with stuff. I mean, the most these guys get is they get fired. And they can go and be the thing is, if they get fired, a lot of times they don't get fired. A lot of times they resign, and people go, oh, well, he resigned, huh? Yeah, the reason he resigned is so he can be a cop somewhere else. And it's not on his record that he got fired. So when he goes to another police department, he can say he resigned, and he can say, oh, I had problems with the department. Internal problems or whatever. And a lot of times that stuff won't even get disclosed. And people go, well, how do these cops, how do their new departments, when they find out, like a cop was at one department and went to another department, and they say, how did the one department not know about the other department, and blah, 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 blah. Don't they do a background check? Well, if the guy resigns, that's the deals that these police unions cut. Oh, he'll resign, and it's on his record that he resigned. That's it. It's not on his record that he was fired. If it was on his record that he was fired, then it would have to be, why was he terminated? He's a police officer. It's not that hard to get fired. It's not that easy to get fired from that job. Why would you get fired from the job? It would be on the record. If he resigns, he resigns, and whatever reason he states for his resignation in the letter is the official reason for resigning. Right? I know. I got sidetracked. Anyway. Fear is what they're fed. Fear is what your neighbors are fed. Fear for fear. Fear, 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 fear. Crap your pants. Fear, fear, fear. Osama bin Laden in your underwear drawer. Fear, 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 fear. Your kid could get a head injury from playing football. Fear for fear, fear. Which, by the way, is true. Your kid could get injured playing football. But if you put your kid in football, you ought to know that. It's like, would you let your son join the Marine Corps? And then go, oh my God, he could get shot Are you kidding me? We need to ban that. We need a law banning shooting in the Marine Corps. Really? You think that's going to happen? People need to grow up and use their heads. You can't protect everybody from bad things. And you got to stop being afraid of everything. Oh my God, I could burn myself on the stove so I won't cook. Well, I guess nothing will ever get cooked again, and everybody will start to get sick from eating raw food and bacteria and everything. So there'll be mass die-offs from that. Well, I probably shouldn't turn the light switch on because there's a possibility that perhaps one day if you turn a light switch on, it could short out and either maybe electrocute me or cause a fire. So I guess I won't turn on the light switch. In fact, electricity is dangerous. You could get electrocuted or have a fire. So I'll just turn the power off with the power company altogether and use candles. But wait, candles could get knocked over and then still cause a fire. They're a fire hazard, so I can't use candles. A flashlight and batteries. Okay, that's good. I could use a flashlight and batteries. That sounds good. Oh, wait a minute. The batteries could leak, and battery acid could be corrosive and harmful to my health. And somebody could break in and beat me with the flashlight. Or I could drop the flashlight on the floor in the middle of the night, and while looking for it, step on it, slip, fall, and hit my head. So I guess I can't get the flashlight. Oh, man, what am I going to do? I guess there's sunlight, I guess. Okay, I could read by sunlight, and I guess I could just go to bed when the sun goes down like they use. Oh, wait a minute, you can get sunburn and perhaps sun poisoning. And that could lead to ill health too. Oh no. So then what do I do? Get the point? I mean, it's ridiculous. You could what if everything. Bad things are going to happen. It's how we deal with them. If you prepare your child or yourself to deal with situations in the best possible manner, that's okay. But if you live your life trying to protect everybody around you from bad things happening, you're going to go nuts. It's never going to happen. And you're never going to be able to stop bad things from happening to people. It's just not the way it works. Okay? And in fact, I think the more you try to make bad things not happen, they happen. It just seems to work out that way. We have to understand that. We got to stop living in fear and being afraid of everything. Don't be afraid. If a dog bites, look, if you're a police officer and you animate a costume, don't be afraid of a friggin' dog that's 12 pounds and barking. Stop. Use your head. And if it comes at you and it tries to bite you, you can push it away with your foot and say, hey, get away from me. And then you say to the owner, come get your dog, or I'll have to mace it or something. Or you have a taser. You could always try to tase the animal as opposed to shooting it. Everything just gets, the escalation of force is ridiculous. It goes right beyond any non-lethal, alternative, right to death, because I play first-person shooter video games and I don't get a chance to shoot enough people in real life. I mean, really? You need to knock this crap off. And everybody else needs to stop living in fear, too. Stop calling the cops on your neighbor if their kids are playing outside. Didn't you play outside when you were a friggin' kid? Just gets frustrating. Anyway, when we come back, I got the audio of that CPS whistleblower. Stay tuned. Some hardcore stuff. Don't go anywhere. We are back, ladies and gentlemen. Final segment. Tonight's live edition. I am going to play, as promised, the audio of this interview with a CPS whistleblower. It's from a podcast called the Renegade Variety Hour, and it's about 22 minutes long. It's going to take up most of the segment here, but I think you guys need to hear what this individual has to say. As I said, I'm working on getting him on the broadcast for an interview, but rather than make you wait, however long it's going to take for me to get in touch with this individual, and then, schedule him, whether he comes on live or we do a pre-recorded broadcast, I'd rather let you hear what he has to say. This is some pretty damning information, especially from somebody on the inside. And it's not shocking to anybody that knows the truth about CPS, but for those of you that don't know about CPS, this might give you a better idea about some of the shenanigans that these people pull. Just evil evil, evil organization, Child Protective Services, no matter what acronym they use in your state. And believe me, they're really not there to protect the children. What goes on is horrific. And they're not there out of good, let me put it that way. And there are certain cases where, yes, I can even agree that there are certain situations where the children should be removed from a home because the parents are horrific. But trust me, when you hear the truth, you'll understand why CPS does more harm than good. Anyway, the lady you're going to hear, her name is Taryn Harris. She's the hostess of the Renegade Variety Hour, and she's interviewing this young man. His name is, let me look on here really quick for you guys so I can give you his name. It's Carlos Morales, and he's a former CPS investigator from Texas. And you'll hear him, he talks about, he says he was a CPS investigator for about a little over a year in Texas. So let's get right to the audio. I'm going to give the floor to them for, well, we'll have a few minutes, but pretty much the remainder of the broadcast, I'm going to let you hear this interview about the truth about CPS. And you'll hear him even say that he's seen some cases where people shouldn't, their kids shouldn't have been in houses. But just listen to what he has to say about what really goes on. I'm sure if you don't know, it'll shock you. Here we go.
Why did you leave CPS? Or what was your primary reason for leaving?
I was a special investigator for Child Protective Services in Texas from February 2012 to March 2013. I already was a libertarian.
Oh, and before I let this go further, just so you know, there is some, he swears a few times in this. It's uncensored, we'll say. So you're going to hear some curse words. It's him. It's him expressing his raw feelings and what he witnessed. Just try. It's tough to hear what he has to say anyway, so the cursing really isn't going to affect you when you hear the rest of what he has to say. But I figured I would warn you just in case some people have sensitive ears, or if there's little ones in the room. What he talks about is, well, you'll hear it. Just there's some cussing, to say the least.
Whenever I joined, but I kind of bought into the idea that Child Protective Services would be the one agency where I could actually help children, though they were a branch of the government. They'd be the ones who would actually be helping. And I found that I was wrong on every single level. What I saw was not just normal bureaucratic corruption that's reported in the local news, but an entire system that was kind of built to fail. The power the investigators had and CPS held, which was kind of the power over every single child, and the ability to be able to destroy lives, is one that wasn't really handled carefully. I didn't quit because, as some people in the agency stated, I didn't have the toughness for it, or, this takes special kind of people. I quit because what we were doing was not helping people, but instead destroying lives. I came to think of it in the same way Judge Brian Lindsay explained it, which was there is no system ever devised by mankind that is guaranteed to rip husband and wife or father, mother and child apart so bitterly in our present family court system.
Right. Did you have an instance that really captured you? Because I do remember when you first started working, you were telling me about some pretty intense scenes that I just personally, I don't think I really could have handled that well, that you seem to handle really well, and
yeah.
Was there a moment, or was there something, or was there finally a build-up that made you realize this isn't what I think it is?
Well, I guess my first case was very much my best case, in the sense that it seemed like a clear-cut kind of situation where there was a drug bust at a home, and there were children there who were being forced to take a shit around the areas where the drugs were in order to prevent people from coming in to steal them. There was no running electricity in the house, but the drug dealers themselves actually owned like a Hummer and a number of nice cars. And there was a mother there who we were pretty sure was on drugs. The mother cried and screamed, and the children cried and screamed, and neighbors came out saying, "Please don't take away these children. Please don't send them to a foster home." Supposedly, we couldn't find any placement besides a foster home, which I still doubt even now. And it seemed like one of the situations where, oh, look, we're actually helping. But, in foster homes, you have a way higher chance of being raped, molested, abused, and killed than you do in an actual home where you're already being abused. And that one case was the best case I ever had. From there, it was cases where, there was maybe a father who was smoking marijuana 2 weeks ago, and then you end up having to set him up in a situation to where you're going to end up traumatizing the kids because they're going to tell the dad he has to leave the home. There was one case where there was a removal involving some children who were hanging out outside, and Child Protective Services found that to be improper, so the children will have to be removed from that case and thrown into a foster home. It was one case after another where what we were really doing was enforcing the war on drugs more than enforcing the war on child abuse, because the vast majority of cases we had were not for physical abuse, but they were supposed neglect or just cases that were completely made up, and then we'd have to ask these children questions regarding them being molested, abused, neglected, and emotionally threatened in certain cases where it wasn't even occurring whatsoever, really fucking up these kids. And we did everything through brute force rather than any kind of rational means, which is, I guess, to be expected from any kind of government organization.
Right. Were there any cases where you did encounter actual abuse?
Absolutely. But what I found was that the situations we then removed them from weren't much more helpful. And, especially when we're talking about foster homes, when you're talking about Child Protective Services, you have to think about incentives, because every single agency runs off of incentives. And in the family law system, you have an incentive actually to remove children and to find alleged child abuse, because without child abuse, no one continues to get paid. That's how you get funded. Now, with foster homes, the reason why they have an incentive for abuse is a different kind of abuse, which is the war kind of on children's minds. A foster home is funded, or at least a foster parent is given more money for every single disability that a child has. So if you have a kid who, has just been removed from his home, has been removed from his family, his community, his church, his school, and then you stick him in this situation where, he's meeting these people that he does not know, he's very, very high stress. He might have been malnourished from the last home. So you have a kid who's going to be called ADHD, bipolar, schizophrenic, an insomniac, and a number of other disorders, and they'll pop you on a shitload of pills in order to remedy that so-called situation. So what you have is you have foster homes which are being incentivized to dope kids. Does that mean every single foster home is bad? No. Does that mean every single foster parent is bad? Absolutely not. I got some responses actually from some people who I believe were concerned that I was making that broad statement. I'm absolutely not. I'm simply pointing out the incentives and chances for corruption in Child Protective Services and Texas family, or just family law in general, which are not small. The whole basis for Child Protective Services is very much based primarily on the supposition that the parents that you're going to be dealing with from the get-go are guilty.
Right. So for the parents who are not, in fact, good foster parents, how do they go about getting all of these diagnoses for these children?
Well, the thing is, generally is a psychological evaluation, which can be done by some state doctor who states, this kid has this, and this. We need to put him on such drugs. And this runs the same way that, it kind of works when it comes to parents yelling about their kids being a nuisance to them, right. Which is the pediatrician or the person doing the psychological evaluation basically is just trying to calm down the situation as quickly as possible rather than doing it through counseling. And the quickest way possible is by sticking him on Seroquel, Zyprexa, Depakote, Adderall, or whatever the hell else prescription drug that has never actually been tested on children in order to kind of zombify him so that he'll be calm for the moment. Of course, while disregarding the legitimate long-term side effects of these drugs.
Yeah. Well, I disagree with you in the respect that these drugs have, in fact, been tested on children, and they know that they have an effect they want, so that's why they use them.
Well, yeah, I guess when I'm stating effects, though, I'm talking about clinical research. Okay. Whenever you're doing a large group study for a psychological drug, whenever you're presenting it to the FDA, you're not allowed to do so on people that are under 18 years old. So instead of testing it in a real clinical, in clinical research, instead it's just given to kids post hoc after the drugs have already been done. So you end up in a situation kind of where these children end up becoming the guinea pigs for pharmaceutical companies. Something I don't think anyone would say is a good idea.
Right. Okay. Well, what types of what tips do you have for parents who, if for instance CPS were to come knocking on your door tomorrow, and you're not a neglectful, not an abusive parent, I think that we all have this notion that they're this authoritarian who is from the state and that we need to let in our doors. Otherwise, we're going to be accused even more so of being neglectful or being, abusive. So do you really have to let them into your homes, or what sort of advice do you have for parents who, have to unfortunately encounter these agents unjustifiably so?
Yeah, so, this kind of list that I'm about to explain actually came with help from a website called fightcps.com, which I'm kind of going to be citing here because they're a very, very helpful website for parents who are dealing with Child Protective Services at the time. I'd also like to state that the statements I'm making, I'm not trying to help people who are physically abusing and molesting their children. Those people need to be handled with, although Child Protective Services has shown time and time again that they're terrible at it. Now, if a CPS investigator comes to your home, number one thing here, stay calm. Do not just start yelling at the investigator and telling him to go fuck himself. The investigator will see any kind of hesitation as admittance of guilt. These people think they're brilliant and have a hard-on for pseudo-justice. In this case, I would recommend not lying, but possibly omitting specific things that are not relevant to the questions asked. If you choose to lie, that's your own choice. But there's certain things that you're going to want to admit. If you admit that you had a drinking problem, say 5 years ago, they'll use that as evidence against you, even if you hadn't had a sip in 5 years, and even if you had therapy because of it. The less said, the better. Child Protective Service social workers usually show up at your door with little to no evidence. If they are acting on anonymous tip, they literally have nothing, and they cannot get a warrant if there's an anonymous tip. They cannot get a court order on anonymous tip. The only thing they can use against you is information you give them for the most part. Don't let them talk to your kid while alone. Now, this is a tip out there for people who children are in public school, which I wouldn't recommend anyway. It's pretty much just an institution that dulls the mind and dulls the will. But if your kids are in public school, at any point, a Child Protective Service investigator is allowed to interview them without even letting you know. So it is important to let your kids know about CPS before they ever even have to deal with them, so that they know what to do and to not be intimidated by these workers who will try to intimidate them. Now, don't let them talk to your kids alone. You don't even need to let them talk to your kids whatsoever. And record everything with videotape if you can. This is not illegal to do and is incredibly important, because in a court case, it's your word against theirs. And as I will constantly remind everyone, you are guilty until proven innocent in family law. Secondly, know your rights. Until a warrant is given, which is incredibly difficult to do, they're not allowed in your house. If you talk a lot, your words will be twisted in such a way to be used against you in court. Also, if you allow this person in your home, which you should not do, they are not legally allowed in your home. But if you do, he will most likely find something there to complain about and use against you in court. A sink with 8 dishes needing washing can show up in his report as a sink full of dirty dishes and a filthy kitchen, which of course would serve to make you look bad to a judge. Therefore, just don't let these people in your house. You have no idea what an issue a CPS investigator can make out of a pile of laundry sitting next to your washing machine. Now, Taryn, I believe you wanted to talk about the kind of questions that would be asked in an investigation?
Yeah, what are the questions that tend to be asked by these individuals? And before we go into that, I wanted to ask, who are these people and what are the qualifications to become a CPS officer?
That is a completely valid question. I actually came from, I had a bachelor's degree in sociology. Mm-hmm. How the hell that had anything to do with being able to understand other individuals' psychology blows my mind. And, it really speaks a lot to the fact that I met Child Protective Service investigators who had a degree in music and then are supposedly supposed to be able to investigate cases as if they have a master's degree in psychology. They're supposed to be able to understand if someone is lying. They're supposed to be able to not intimidate children in some of these cases, even though, not asking leading questions is incredibly difficult. They're supposed to not bring their biases in, which, by the way, is pretty much impossible. They're supposed to know which eyewitness reports to trust, eyewitness reports which are going to be incredibly fallible. I think it's important to be reminded of the fact that in many of these cases, you're dealing with people's memory, which is already going to be slippery as it is. At CPS, we had to make investigation reports based off of our memory of someone else, who many times is basing off of memory of someone else who had an inherent bias in their story. That story was then edited at least a few times until getting to the investigator. And with that basis, we had the ability to disrupt a family structure and traumatize a child. And we had to do all of this with 2 months of training.
With 2 months of training? So you have someone with a bachelor's degree in music who goes through 2 months of training and then knocks on houses and potentially disrupts homes and separates families. That's... Okay. All right. Well, anyway, no, continue. So going beyond that, what are the types of questions that these officers with their qualifications tend to ask?
Okay. So they're going to basically, what they're trying to fill out a risk assessment to be able to tell, okay, what are the main reasons why we should remove this child from this home?
Right.
One of the things they're going to ask you is family history. Okay, so they're trying to check to see if there was any abuse in your history. Now, what you need to realize that even if you were hit as a child, this isn't the time to bring it up. The CPS worker is not your therapist. Don't bring up, I was molested when I was 6 years old. They're going to use that as evidence against you. Any abuse in your past will be used against you.
Can I just clarify?
For instance, saying something like...
or to the child?
Excuse me, I'm referring to the adult. Now, if you're an adult, right, and you say, I'm not an abuser, I should know what it is, I was abused as a kid, what this says to them is that you were abused, therefore you are likely to be an abuser. Believe me, no matter what terrible situation you went through as a kid, it is better not to mention any of this to a social worker. They will not feel sorry for you suddenly out of nowhere, and they're going to use this evidence as evidence against you. Remember, all information they're going to try to use against you. Secondly, what they're going to bring up is your drug history. This is another thing where I'm not going to suggest that you lie, just maybe omit some things. If you smoked weed 4 weeks ago, guess what? They can use that as evidence to the point of being able to take your child out of the home if they can stack it right. If they can tell it to their supervisor and her supervisor right, or maybe even to the judge, who might be one of those radical, hey, most parents are fucking terrible kind of judges. Don't admit or omit the fact that you might have smoked weed 4 weeks ago or something along those lines. Don't bring up the fact that you used any kind of drugs in college. All of these things will be used against you. Remember, Child Protective Service investigators are not there for your best interests. They're there for their own interests and their own incentives, and their incentives are not to protect the parent. They'll also bring up alcohol use. Now, if you actually let them in your house, then you have your bottles of wine or whiskey or whatever the hell you have there. It's going to be hard to be able to bring up that you don't drink. What I would mainly suggest is to state, I rarely, if ever, do. I can't even remember the last time I did. They'll try to ask you more detailed questions. Be generic, be general. Don't go into too much detail, because the more detail you go into, the more chances you have of contradicting yourself. By the way, contradiction doesn't always mean that they're lying. Sometimes you just end up saying something incorrectly. Then they'll ask you questions regarding domestic violence history. If your husband's ever yelled at you, or if your wife's ever yelled at you, deal with that through therapy. Don't deal with that through CPS. Again, this is not a therapy session. They're going to use this as evidence against you. They might possibly drug test you as well if they're concerned about that. If the anonymous reporter stated that you were a drug user. Now, you can state that you don't want to do any drug tests whatsoever, which is fine, but just know that they can get a court order to make you do a piss test. And then a piss test is going to be more in depth. For instance, if you smoked weed 6 weeks ago, they might be able to tell that. Or they might just simply state, hey, why don't you do this mouth swab test? And these mouth swab tests, they're not great. In fact, if they swab your mouth, they can tell if you've smoked weed in the last 2 to 3 days, but any time before that, it's not going to really be able to tell anything. Most everything else is 24 to 48 hours. So if you did cocaine 2 weeks ago and a mouth swab test, it's not going to show it. Realize that drug contradictions may occur in these tests. For instance, if you're on a drug called Lamictal, it'll show up positive as PCP. Mainly with all these things, realize again that you're simply trying to get these people out of your lives as quickly as possible. Next, they'll ask you for something called collaterals. Collaterals are people that can back up any claims you make. In this case, you may want to give them some information. Maybe you'll give them a trusted friend or a family member Don't give them names of ex-husbands or ex-boyfriends. They're going to fuck you over. And there's many cases where they have. Have friends you know who know the system. Talk to people before CPS gets in contact with them. Tell them your story and warn them about Child Protective Services. While you're doing all of this, and Taryn, I'll let you go in a sec. I want to make sure I get this.
That's okay. Go ahead.
Keep a notebook. Keep a notebook explaining everything. Facts about your case. For instance, what really happened, notes on every single phone call, notes on every single meeting, notes on every single visitation, contacts with expert witnesses, notes about the court hearings, on anything out of the ordinary that happens, counseling appointment notes, notes about the psych evaluation, a record of all drug tests and results, reminders about the date of your next hearing just as an organization. By the way, if you miss any of these, you can get really screwed over, so don't do that. Visitation notes, foster parents' names and contact information if you have it, notes on all contacts or attempted contacts with your lawyer, and notes on all your daily activities. If all this still leads to you end up having to go to court, get a lawyer. I don't care about your financial constraints. If you care about your children, you will get a lawyer. Make sure that the lawyer deals with family law cases and not just some lawyer you find on TV. FightCPS.com has a list of lawyers who can help you in this situation. If the court demands that you do the classes, do all of them. They'll look at any reason to destroy parental rights. Again, copy and print everything from your notebook and keep all the information in a safe place. In the world of the family courts, you are guilty until proven innocent, and you need to always remember that.
So my next question would be, do you even have to talk to these individuals in the first place? If someone comes knocking on your door, being an investigator with those types of qualifications, do you really have to communicate with them in the first place?
Yes, you do. So you can simply say, I'm not going to talk to you whatsoever, but say there's another family who hates you, like they hate the fact that you're a loud neighbor or whatever else. They can make up charges about drugs or abuse or pedophilia and a number of other things, and then they can finally get a court case against you, and you end up with cops at your home, and they can take your kids. So realize, again, the stay calm thing. Do talk to these people. Just be prepared before you go in. It's not the same as getting pulled over where you don't talk to the cop whatsoever. This is a case where it's all flimmy-flammy. Very few people actually pay attention to the many of the laws. And most importantly, CPS investigators hope you don't know your rights. And they don't ever explain to the investigators to remind parents of their rights. It's easier to abuse the situation, although in their cases they just simply state it's easier on them if you don't know your rights. It's corrupt from the very get-go.
Well, easier on them referring to the children who are in a particular circumstance, or easier on the parent who is being...
Well, according to them, they're the child abuse warriors. So to them, anything that's good for CPS is good for children whatsoever.
Okay.
Anyway, I would like to remind everyone just to make sure you check out CPS.com for any further information in regards to this. Taryn, I know we wanted to go in more about kind of free market solutions for something like Child Protective Services, but for now I think it's important to just kind of get this information. So make sure everyone to check out FightCPS.com. Check out our prior podcast on Child Protective Services and the true incentives behind it. And if you need any kind of help and you can't get it through FightCPS.com, email us at therenegadevariety@gmail.com. If this seems crass, I understand, but make sure to check us out on Facebook as well and on therenegadevariety.com if you need any more information. Do not have any concerns about contacting me. Contact me as soon as possible. If you're a libertarian and you need help with any of this kind of CPS stuff, let me know. But be upfront, don't lie. And if you're the kind of person who's going to justify hitting children before you message me, don't bother messaging me whatsoever. Thanks, Sarah.
Thank you.
There you go, ladies and gentlemen. The truth about CPS in a nutshell. And sometimes when the kids go to these abusive foster homes, they disappear or bad things happen, and there are kids that are sold and stuff, but you just heard the basics and some very useful warnings, some tips from an ex-CPS investigator himself. Carlos Morales is his name. I'm working on getting him on the broadcast. All right, ladies and gentlemen, we're out of time. Be an autodidact. Educate yourself to this stuff so you know what's going on. The best way to protect yourself is with knowledge. We're out of time. I'll see you all again live tomorrow night. Until then, remember, look to yourself for the solution. The solutions to our problems are an inside job, ladies and gentlemen. I love you all. I'm out of here.